It just upsets me, man, because this used to be, from the 90s to the 2010s, video games had a specific purpose, right? It wasn't a shitty tech demo, and it wasn't like a movie with occasional prompts. It was like striking that balance in the middle, where it's like, okay, this is like, you know, like Metal Gear Solid, like you have some gameplay and then you have some story, and you have like both, right? And both are important. Like, you need story to motivate you to play the game, and you need gameplay to motivate you to read the story. You need balance of both of those things. Otherwise, you know, players aren't going to be that interested. And what do we see, man? That's what we're seeing in Switch era Nintendo. I mean, it speaks for itself. There's GameCube on the Nintendo Switch Online, right? They're celebrating that fact. Can I just say, for a fucking moment, that if on the Wii we have N64 games, don't you think that we should have had GameCube on the fucking Wii U? That should have been day one Switch. That should have been pre-Switch, not Switch 2. That's not how time works, guys. It's like if a deer stared at your headlights and said, "Man, I should get out of the way," and then it still stood there. That's the situation we're dealing with. Future Tockles here. I just wanted to say that originally this VOD had a lot more Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom hate, and I just wanted to say that I realize that you don't know what you have until it's gone, and this is just a matter of the pendulum swinging. So I don't want to impose upon people who are genuine fans of Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. Maybe they'll see something in this that I don't see in it, in the same way that A Link to the Past fans didn't see anything in Ocarina of Time and Skyward Sword and, you know, that whole generation that I grew up with. So I'm going to leave in the Miyamoto hate because that's part of my personality, but I'm going to take out the newer games hate because I'll admit to not understanding that fully. And you may want to stick around until the end, because I do actually have something positive to say about Tears of the Kingdom, which is kind of surprising at this current time. Shaggy. What kind of a name is Shaggy? Oh, we're off to a horrible start. Alright, so I mean, basically what I would just want to talk about is, like, everything that we've lost, because it's a lot. I don't know. There's a lot of layers to it, because, like, obviously, Eiji Aonuma did not create Zelda, right? Let's make that clear. Miyamoto created Zelda 1. But at the end of the day, Zelda 1 doesn't really have anything going on behind it. I mean, it's... You know, I mean, he's explained it multiple times in interviews and stuff. He's just like, oh, well, you know, I liked fucking around in caves in Japan as a kid. And it's like, that's all there is to it. It's basically... It's like Pokemon, but even more shallow. So... Plus, like, half of Breath of the Wild. Breath of the Wild is kind of weird, because... Oh shit, I got the hook shot. Well, anyway... Breath of the Wild's kind of weird, because... It's a scenario where, you know, he started out in that position, but obviously Iwata is dead, so Miyamoto has, like, full reign. He's able to meddle in everybody else's projects. He already ruined Mario Odyssey or whatever. It's like, fine. And then he goes in and meddles with Breath of the Wild, even though, you know, he's working with Fujibayashi. Fujibayashi made Minish Cap and the Oracle games, I think. He made the Oracle games. And so he's working with him, and it's like, oh, well, you know, you can help me make Skyward Sword, and then you can make me help me make Breath of the Wild. But Miyamoto inserts himself, even though he doesn't belong there. Even though, you know, he made Zelda 1 and Zelda 2, and then, you know, walked the fuck out. Like, he didn't care about any of this. He didn't struggle. He didn't fucking try. And it's like, he wasn't involved. And so for him to think that he has any input on a project that he left 2 decades ago, it's insane and ridiculous. But he wants to, he wants it to be a certain way. He wants them to have XYZ mechanic, and it's like, well, we can't do that, Miyamoto. We've already made the whole game like this. And he's like, well, do it anyway. It's like bullshit. Like every single Zelda, if you read Iwata Asks, every single time, it's like there's some hurdle where Miyamoto's like, no, you can't start Twilight Princess as a wolf. It won't make any sense. They won't like it. And it's like, okay, well, I guess we'll accommodate you, but it's like, that's seniority. He isn't. He's not involved. He didn't come up with the story. He didn't do anything. He doesn't know what the purpose is. And, Miyamoto's he's a relic from a time that is like, it's long since passed, dude. He joined Nintendo at a time where they were making toys. And, if you look at arcade games, they are toys that steal your money. We don't want video games to be toys that steal your money. We don't want it to be this, like, shallow thing where it's like, ooh, I pressed the jump button and it make it jump. Hoo, hoo, hoo. And, like, that's the entire content of the game. We don't want games to be that. But Miyamoto is like, oh, we need to make Mario's face stretchy on the top. And it's like, well, I guess it's cute, but that's not really a video game, guys. We need to have levels. We need to have a level design. We need to have a story. And he's like, nah, just make this weird gimmick thing. We've lost a lot. I just want to say that, let's start with that. You don't know what you have until it's gone, and oh boy, is it gone. And okay, just to give like some background, right? I grew up with Wind Waker and Twilight Princess. Okay, I was a GameCube kid. And I had both those games. It never weirded me out that the art style was different. I didn't get any of that controversy. It was kind of a nothing burger to me my whole life. And the whole, like, oh, Twilight Princess is linear, that whole thing, that never got me. I never understood the Wolf Link complaints. I never understood the complaints about spirit orbs or light orbs or whatever the bug things are called that you kill. I didn't get any of that. That never made any fucking sense to me. I was just like, well, it's, like cartoony or realistic, linear or unlinear. Zelda is Zelda, right? Like it has Zelda on the front. At the time, in my ignorance, I was just like, well, it has Zelda on the front. That means it's Zelda, right? And at the time, that was still true because he was actually in creative control. But now he is not. I've been reading a lot of old interviews, and I've been going on like Wayback Machine stuff, so like stuff that's like doesn't even exist anymore. It's all in Japanese, so I have to Google translate it. I have to go on a archaeological expedition to find all this shit. And what I've found, ladies and gentlemen, is that there is an artistry to these 5 games. Okay, there is an intelligence behind them. The timeline was not just a grift. It was, because they had talked about that for like 20 years at that point. It was like, people asked him about it in Wind Waker. It's like, oh, well, how does this, because like, oh, Link to the Past is a prequel or whatever. So like, how does this fit in with that? And he's like, oh yeah, Ocarina is a prequel. And so, I don't know if I have the patience to do it, because there's so much going on with video games, and there's like so much to learn, and I have to start from zero, because not only have you already played all the games, you also didn't understand any of it, because you're like, oh, the timeline doesn't make sense. Of course it makes sense, you fucking jackass. Oh my god. It's funny because the narrative on that has like shifted so many times, because before what they would say is like, oh yeah, Nintendo has no official timeline, right? they would always word it that way too. They would never say Aonuma. They would say Miyamoto didn't make a timeline, or they would say Nintendo doesn't make a timeline, because they've never actually read an interview. They have no idea what the plot is. Not like the plot of the game is like they've lost the plot, right? They are not paying attention at all. So for them to say it's Nintendo or Miyamoto, they don't know. They have no clue who Eiji Aonuma is. And so for them to say that, it's like so shit. But then after the timeline comes out, retroactively, even though there's like an AVGN video from 2009, right? They'll say, oh, they just made up the Hyrule Historia manual. They made that up in 2011, right? Like, as if that makes sense, right? They're going to go back and try to change history and forget what they said before. Like, timeline denial is such a hard cope. It's so hard, because it's like, you have just proven you know nothing. And you care about nothing. And, like, why do we let these people dominate discussions? There's not a lot going on. So, okay, so Miyamoto makes that game. And then Tezuka steps in. And he's like, okay, well, you know, you did Zelda 2 or whatever. Here, let me step in, and I'll make Link to the Past, and I'll make Link's Awakening. And Aonuma's like, oh, hot shit, dude. Let me make Marvelous, which is inspired by A Link to the Past. And then he goes on to, I mean, he joined kind of late in development with Ocarina, but he's, you know, the dungeon designer. And you know, before that, they were basically just experimenting with the engine and using, like, Mario 64 stuff to try to make a Zelda game. And it wasn't really, I mean, because one of the things that we know is that the first dungeon that got finished was the Forest Temple. And in the prototypes, if you've played them, you'll know the Forest Temple is, yeah, basically one-to-one with retail. Except it's like missing, it's missing like doors or something. It's kind of jank. The programming, and like things are misaligned. But as far as like the actual level design, it's all there, right? So, from there, it's like, well, and if he's coming up with all these things, and if Koizumi's writing the lore at that point, you kind of get the sense, like, and there's obviously problems to Ocarina, too. Like, I'll get into that later. But I think it's important to notice there is a distinct change between A Link to the Past and Ocarina. And I think a lot of early fans saw that as a sign of, oh, the games are getting worse. But, you know, different is not necessarily worse. I mean, that shouldn't have to be said, but, you know, it isn't. And, you know, growing up when I did, it was just part of the zeitgeist. It was just like, oh yeah, Ocarina has been out forever, and it's, you know, it's more linear than A Link to the Past, but, like, who cares? It's the greatest game of all time, and it revolutionized 3D gaming, so, like, who really gives a fuck? You know, it just kind of acquiesces. It's like, it doesn't matter. Up to a certain point, it doesn't matter at all. This fucking pot always gets me. Oh, these pots. This thing is actually pulled in Skyward Sword. This is used for like a brief set piece here, and then never used again. But in Skyward Sword, they have like a whole area in the Linearu Desert for this, which is kind of fucking awesome. That's the kind of thing that I mean, by the way. That's not just a tangent. That was like related, because if you notice, like, connections between, you know, the repetition of ideas, he's reusing the ideas so that you can gain a connection between them. It's not just, like, lazy reuse, because he would have had to remake that from the ground up in the same engine and you know, affix it to Skyward's art style. It still takes the same amount of effort that it did to implement it originally. So the only reason to meticulously recreate it is if you have a specific emotional purpose behind it. And I I mean, I can't discern on the spot, right? I can't discern on the spot what that is. But, you know, that's sort of how video games work. If you are someone who believes that video games should be considered art, that's like the starting place. Prop rent. Yeah, let's do pop rent. That's the other thing, like, I'm so confused why people, when they're talking about Zelda, and they're like, oh, you know, why is Twilight Princess and Skyward Sword so linear? It's like, well, Wind Waker is too, bitch. Like, did you notice that you can... like, when you're first doing this, obviously I'm in a randomizer right now, so it doesn't apply to me. But when you're first doing this, you start on Windfall, and then you have to sail directly to Dragon Roost, right? And then you have to sail directly from Dragon Roost all the way down to Forest Haven. And that's like the whole map length. Look at that. That's huge. And you can only travel in this like L shapes, right? So like if you're in Windfall, for example, right? You can't like cut across diagonally and say, "Oh yeah, I'm gonna get to Forest Haven." No, you have to travel like from Windfall to Dragon Roost down south from there. Like, you can't go southeast. You basically can't go any direction that you want to until you get bombs. Like, the only thing you can do is Paw Print Island. Because you can't go into the fire volcano, because that's, you have to have ice arrows, I think. Yeah, you have to have ice arrows to freeze Fire Mountain to get in there. So you can't do anything there. It's like, between, like, it's pretty much just overworld story stuff and dungeons. But like, if you're playing a Zelda game, what the fuck else is there to do, guys? You solve puzzles and you watch story. Like, who the fuck else? Who needs anything else, right? Like, what? Am I the only one that doesn't give a fuck if there isn't a grotto every other 10 minutes to keep me awake? Like, seriously, you need to just have that to pay attention. It's like really petty, and I don't think that should be taken seriously if someone says that. Getting back to okay, so in when we get to Majora's Mask, everyone knows the famous Majora's Mask story. You know, he says, "Oh, you know, we're gonna do the Ocarina of Time Master Quest. It's gonna be so cool and so original, and it's just like an asset swap." But whatever, you know, and Aonuma's like, well, this is crap, you know, I loved, you know, making Ocarina's dungeons, and now you're sitting here telling me I have to rearrange them for this new thing that you didn't even explain it properly, it's so poorly explained, and nobody got what it was, and then eventually it's like, oh, it's just Master Quest. Well, this is boring as fuck. But so by the end of that, he's like, okay, well, now you only have a year to make Majora's Mask, because I'm not going to give you any budget, and you can get, like, half of my team or whatever. But if you do that, then I'll let you make however many Zelda games you want to for the rest of your life or whatever. And he's like, well, shit, that's a deal of a lifetime. I have to go for that. So then Aonuma actually, like, makes good on his bet. And, like, that's the point at which things are, oh, fuck, do I have to do this? I don't know if I know how to do this. Majora's Mask. So Majora's Mask, he makes that. There's a specific old-ass interview that I found, wherein he's talking about how the animators came up with that, the cutscene that is now used to show, like, Link turning into a Deku Scrub. He, like, saw that, because they made it as, like, a test animation, right? It wasn't connected to anything. And then afterwards, he had, like, a dream where that happened, and he sort of emotionally connected and read into it. And he decided, okay, let's just make the story around that, right? And then he also talks about how the Icona Doctor, that whole story was to get the Gibdo mask. That was autobiographical. He's talking about... maybe I should just show all this on screen. I mean, I have it on my hard drive, but it's just like, that would be a pain. I'm trying to edit this, like, 40-minute video to explain all this shit, too, and it's like... I just get so wrapped up in it, and it's like, I don't I put too much emotional stock into it, and I can't do anything to it at that point. It's like, between, like, it's pretty much just overworld story stuff and dungeons. But, like, if you're playing a Zelda game, what the fuck else is there to do, guys? You solve puzzles, and you watch story. Like, who the fuck else? Who needs anything else? Right? Like, what? Am I the only one that doesn't give a fuck if there isn't a grotto every other 10 minutes to keep me awake? Like, seriously? You need to just have that to pay attention? It's like really petty, and I don't think that should be taken seriously if someone says that. But that gets into, like, you know, why Skyward is so linear, because it's meant to be the first one. It sets up all the story stuff, like, because in Zelda, you know, they don't tell you everything. Like, it's not really supposed to be a mystery, right? But it's like, oh, you know, certain things are happening in the background, right? That don't really get really get a spotlight. Like, for example, in Ocarina of Time, you know, you're doing, like, the last bit of the game, right? You're doing Shadow Temple, and you're doing Spirit Temple, and you defeat Bongo Bongo, right, and that whole thing. But if you'll notice, like, you know, the windmill's screwed up, and the bottom of the well is, like, drained, right? If the well is drained, what do you think happens to Kakariko? If they don't have a source of water, if the water is, like, getting pulled out of their, you know, out of where they live, what do you think happens to Kakariko? It turns into a desert, guys. The soil dries up, and it turns into, you know, because it's right next to Death Mountain. It's got this, like, really rocky soil, and then you, like, remove all the moisture. So that's why it looks like that in Twilight Princess. It's not hard to figure out. Like, and other things like that work too, because if you think about the Spirit Temple, what happens with the Spirit Temple? Well, Kume and Kotake, they brainwash Nabaru and turn her into fucking Iron Knuckle, right? And guys, where do you kill Twinrova in? It's not in the child timeline. So, and you can't even go to Gerudo Fortress as a child, or at least you're not supposed to be able to get there. You can do it through, like, wrong warping, but, like, properly visiting there, like, in a story scenario, we don't know what, you know, we don't know what they could have been doing, what that could have looked like. And so for them to still be at large, right, that's something that the Hyrule would have to deal with politically, right? And they would have to get into that. And you see, like, a little bit of it in Majora, like, Link has a new shield, and he has a new hilt for the Kokiri sword, and it's like, ooh, he got outfitted by a Hyrulean army, right? But they don't really get into it. They don't really, you know, we're pretty much ignorant to all of that. But yeah, it's like one of those things where it's like, well, damn, guys, like, if you were curious, like, who's the ancient tribe that uses the Majora's Mask and hexing rituals? Oh, who made the fused shadow? Who are the interlopers? It's like, it's so bloody fucking obvious. Like, like, it could only be one group of people. I mean, it's even on Zant's robes. If you look on Zant's robes, it has the fucking Gerudo symbol. Like, how did no one notice that? Oh God! And then in the cutscene with with Midna, right? She's like, "Oh, you know how we could tell? It was your eyes. You had greedy eyes." And what did Gerudo have, guys? They have the golden eyes. But it's like there, and you know, Zant is clearly the third male Gerudo. It's like you know, he is the heir to the patriarchy. So that's why Ganon would seek him out and, like, isolate him and be like, okay, you can have my powers. That's why Ganon picks him, because he's supporting the patriarchy. And it's obviously, Noboru is turning other people into Iron Knuckles too. If you read the Carpenter dialogue, he's talking about like, oh, Noboru is so, she's like a ruthless. Look, the point is like, Noboru would still be messing people up and taking names, and Kume and Kotake would still be screwing things up, and also Ganondorf doesn't get sealed in the he doesn't get sealed in the child timeline for a good while there, so he's still at large. And, what's the Hyrulean army doing about that? So, I don't know, it just kind of, like, comes off as, like, when people make the theories and they're like, oh, it's the interlopers of the Sheikah because of yada yada, and it's just like, what planet are we on? But that's... And, Breath of the Wild also screws that shit up, too, because they make that the Sheikah technology instead of, it's obviously just reskinning the Twilight magic, right? Like, if you look at it, if you pay attention and you look at it, like, look at the glowing lines all over the metallic surfaces, and, like, think about that, right? Think about what that should be. And, like, Breath of the Wild, the land isn't flooded. And the Downfall timeline, Aonuma wasn't involved with those games. So we can basically say that they're not canon, right? But it's like, if Breath of the Wild is supposed to be this child timeline game, and it has, the Zonai technology, or whatever the hell they're gonna reskin it as. That was a useless chest. Oh boy. This is another thing that Aonuma paid a lot of attention to and cared about, because it wasn't just, the whole like, oh yeah, you're driving a boat, and it wasn't just like a thing. I've heard it said that Wind Waker just has water physics because every GameCube era game has water. They just wanted to show off the technology. If you look, I think it's... I forget which art book it is, because they released like 3 art books, right? But the art director of this game came up with the toon style so that it would specifically... stand out from all the realism games that were coming out. And Aonuma defended that decision, right? He defends that decision, and he knows that Miyamoto is not going to like it. So what he does is he hides it from him for as long as possible. And then, after that, he's like, okay, we finally, we have to break the ice. And then Miyamoto still is like, oh yeah, I hate it, just like he said he would. And then he, like, fights for him. He's like, no, I want this to, I want the game to look like this. And it's like, that mattered to him. He cared about the rest of his team. He didn't just leave them behind. It wasn't just like, oh yeah, I'm gonna, make my weird art games and, screw everyone else. Aonuma's actually extremely humble. Every time he's been given an award, which is only twice so far, by the way, he's like, oh, I don't know if I can accept this, because I didn't make Zelda, and, like, all my teammates are, oh, I'm really accepting this award from my teammates, this is a victory for them more than it is for me. This is the happiest day of my life today. And it's like, he's so fucking humble. Like, God. Like, how is this guy not, like, the least bit proud? He isn't the least bit, like, take some... But it... I don't know, man. It just gets to be one of those things where it's like, if you don't stand up for yourself, I fucking have to. Because in the timeline, he even includes, like, games he didn't direct in his own timeline. It's like, well, obviously Four Swords and A Link to the Past and all these other games weren't made with the timeline in mind. This was way before that. but he includes them anyway because he doesn't want them to feel left out. And it's like, that's cute, that's commendable. But then people are like, well, why is Minish Cap here? That makes no sense. That's so weird. And it's like, well, you know, it's a little bit of both. You know, you have to take it. It's like the important part of the timeline is his games. That doesn't mean the other games aren't canon. That doesn't mean they aren't, you know, oh hey, this is BS. It means that, you know, these are the ones that it actually matters to. Because when you're creating a story that has time jumps, like Aonuma was, you know, and it's not like he like had Minish Cap in mind when he was making Skyward or whatever. Like he, you know, he only focused on his games and I guess A Link to the Past a little bit. But, you know, he's not focusing on every single tertiary game. And, you know, those are the ones where the timeline is actually relevant. His 5 games. So, plus, like, half of Breath of the Wild. Breath of the Wild is kind of weird, because, oh shit, I got the hook shot. But yeah, my point being is that we had a whole story going on there, and now it's just, like, gone, man. And the things going on, and, you know, it's not just the timeline. It's not just like, oh yeah, literal, haha. It's like no, there's purpose to it. Because if you look, you know, I mean, well, first of all, there's a, and thematically, it's like, you know, at the end of this game, it's like, you know, oh, you know, Ganondorf is gonna drown with Hyrule, and he's like culturally out of touch because, like, you know, the whole art style of this game is like super cartoony and it stands out from the rest of them because it's like, oh yeah, the whole Hyrule's dead basically, and it's like everyone else has moved on. The Rito, you know, they have some cultural heritage to the Zoras, but they've mostly like shed that, right? And they don't have, like, they have Din's Pearl, they don't have Nehru's Pearl. The Kokiri are also a shadow of their former selves, and they don't really have that much connection to their past either. But Ganondorf is like clinging to it, and so the whole point of that is like, oh well, you know, build for the future. But then Twilight Princess has like the opposite. It has the opposite moral because it's about protecting your heritage and saving your family. Because, you know, you have the Hero of Time, the Hero of Shade, teaching you all the sword moves and passing on what he knows. And you're also saving the kids from Orden Village, like, constantly. And meanwhile, Ganondorf, in that game, you know, if once you understand that the Twilight are obviously the Gerudo, I mean, it's even on Zant's robes. If you look on Zant's robes, it has the fucking Gerudo symbol. Like, how did no one notice that? Oh God! And then in the cutscene with with Midna, right? She's like, oh, you know how we could tell? It was your eyes. You had greedy eyes. And what did Gerudo have, guys? They have the golden eyes. But it's like there, and you know, Zant is clearly the third male Gerudo. It's like you know, he is the heir to the patriarchy. So that's why Ganon would seek him out and like isolate him and be like, okay, you can have my powers. That's why Ganon picks him, because he's supporting the patriarchy. Ganon is opportunistically abusing his family, whereas TP Link is, you know, trying to save his family. And Wind Waker Link doesn't really give a shit about his family. He's trying to build for the future. You know, the whole, like, you know, Tetra's a pirate. She doesn't know anything about the Zelda Destiny crap. You know, all that is intentional. The fact that the Rito aren't connected to the Zora as cleanly as you might want, like, all that's there. It's on purpose. It's meant to call attention to those things. And because of that, you can see, even though the shoe is on the other foot, Ganondorf is still wrong. Even though they're in the exact opposite scenarios, right? For saving family versus destroying it or leaving it behind and neglecting it. You know, even though that's swapped, the theme is not. That Ganondorf is still in the wrong because he's either obsessive and, you know, he cares about it to the detriment of everything else, or he's just, you know, purely opportunistic. But that's like the whole point of, you know, all the Zelda games do that. You know, in Ocarina of Time, you know, you have the Deku Tree is like basically your father, and Navi is like your mom. And then Ganondorf has surrogate mothers in the place of Kume and Kotake, and like, you know, it's always about orphans. It's always about like, oh, he's just a ranch hand, or he's just a fairy boy, you know. You know, and he's always like, he's just a knight at the academy. You know, he's this very ordinary person, right? Link is supposed to be a very strictly ordinary person, and he's not ready for the challenges that he's about to face. There's a connection between what Jaboon says about Link and what Midna says about it. He says, oh, so this is the hero you were looking for, and Midna's like, nah, but he'll do, you know. He's not what I had in mind, but I guess this'll, you know, this'll work. And the whole time, you know, Deku Tree and Jaboon are like, well, you know, King Hyrule promised that he'd find the Hero of Time. Did he do it? And he's like, no, I couldn't find him, but like, this is our best shot. And the dialogue, I can't remember the specifics of that, but it's like, in certain places, it's like word for word, right? They're doing that on purpose because it's like, you know, he's not supposed to be a predestined, you know, hero, really. I mean, even in Twilight Princess, when, like, you know, he does have the blood of the hero, it's like, well, the hero wasn't remembered as a hero. So it kind of counteracts, because, like, oh yeah, you know? Are you some kind of creep that goes around at night scaring people? I'm an ally of justice. I'm not a thief, I swear. I haven't stolen anything. Well, yeah, please let me go. It was just an impulse. Oh my god. This is literally like what they're trying to talk about with Ganondorf and the greed and the selfishness and the... Oh my god, it's like everything. You know, every side quest, you know, every small thing is like always talking about Ganondorf, metaphorically. Because what's going on here is like they're talking about the, you know, I haven't stolen anything yet. And if you read the interview where he's talking in 2006 about Twilight Princess, he's like, oh, well, you know, this happens 107 years after Ocarina of Time. Because, you know, the 7 is because of the adult timeline. You know, he's frozen for 7 years, but alternatively he does Majora's Mask, and then, you know, the rest of the 7 years pass, and then 100 years pass again, so that it's parallel with Wind Waker still. But Majora is like parallel with the adult dungeons. Anyway, point is, he's like talking about that, and he's like, oh yeah, if you leave Ganondorf alive, you know, he's gonna do. I mean, Google Translate puts it as he's a sacker to do ridiculous things. That's obviously not how it's supposed to be read, but it's like, you know, he's gonna create mischief, basically. It's like, oh, I haven't stolen anything. Well, not yet, anyway. It's like, yeah, he's going to. Why don't you say anything? Or does that mean you're mad at me? Could you at least listen to the circumstances that led to my life? It's pretty much. Alright, sure. Yeah, and again, you know, Ganondorf is supposed to be this tragic villain. You know, he's he's got in the same situation that Link does. You know, you'll notice the Lost Woods reuses the same mechanic in the Haunted Wasteland. And it's like meant to, you know, emphasize that connection where it's like, oh yeah, they're both orphans and they both struggled. And but even though you come from that place, you can still end up in a bad place. You can take that pain and you can identify with it and you can promote that feeling and you know, or you can alternatively take your pain and you can, like, you know, make it, you know, have you build character with pain and struggling. You know, keep trying despite it. You know, and that's even, you know, what's going on with Majora's Mask and all of the transformations, because they transform into monsters and stuff when they put on the masks, and it's like, you know, Ganondorf also has the transformations because he transforms into a pig, and that's like a manifestation of like hate. But what do I know? Yeah, locked in the Forsaken Fortress, and I was held captive. Yeah, so Wind Waker's doing it again. You know, they have the rich kid and the rich family, and he spends every penny trying to get his daughter back, right? And then the poor man was greedy, and he took things opportunistically. And so even though he started out poor, he ends up rich and evil and greedy. And even though the rich man started out rich, he sells everything he owns, and he does it all to save his daughter because he cares about her more than he cares about money. And that's the moral there. And it's like, it matters more. And all of that is to say that, you know, I mean, I don't know, man. That's like the start of it, right? That's the start of it. There's so much to this, and I don't even know how to talk to a lot of people about this crap. It's just like, these are all ideas that have been floating around in my head for this long, and I've just been unable to put them out there. And I want to put them all out there. I want to show everyone, the whole world, all the Eiji Aonuma interviews that I've translated and stuff, and I want to show them, like, hey, this is why video games are art, guys, because, like, if you pay attention, you know, a lot of one of the big things that all the art nerds are gonna tell you is that video games rely too heavily on Q&A testing, and therefore it's like, oh, you know, that because of that, the work isn't following the artist's vision because they're just cowering down to audience demands, and it doesn't have a story behind it. It doesn't have an intelligence behind it. It's just reacting to what the player wants. The reason why they emphasize Q&A testing so damn much is not because they're doing that. I mean, in some cases, yes, but in a lot of cases, no. The Ocarina of Time Hobonichi interview specifically goes over, like, oh, they wanted to make puzzles challenging so that even they couldn't figure it out. They were like, oh, well, you know, they're using that as a way to gauge what a player blind can expect and what they can, you know, what they pick up on and what they don't. It's about playing with that. It's like Q&A testing in a video game is a lot like using animatics in a film, because then you can see the whole layout of the set and see how characters are going to move from one location to another, or, you know, action sequences, storyboarding. It's basically that, but in video game form, because it's an interactive play thing. Oh yeah, I wanted to talk about this. Okay, so Wind Waker, you know, for like the speed dial and the compass and the treasure charts, like this stuff, holy shit, this stuff, this is like so in depth and detailed. Aonuma wanted you to feel like you were actually performing cartography. like in real life. And that was like the whole, like, you pay attention to the moon cycles, right? And you're like charting the seas, right? That's what this feels like. And that was also like, you know, he leans into that for Phantom Hourglass too, because you're actually able to draw on the map and you're with the DS stylus. And that was the whole point. And then in Twilight Princess, it's not as, you know, pronounced because there was development problems with Twilight Princess, but you know, you have the and it was going to be more pronounced. This is another thing with like Breath of the Wild cut content. Okay, so with Twilight Princess, part of the point of that game is, you know, you have the reed whistles and you have bugs, right? And you're riding around on your horse, kind of like Ocarina. You know, there's grottos and stuff, but really it was supposed to feel like you were foraging, right? You're messing around in the grass and you're finding bugs and you're, you know, it's kind of like Pokemon a little bit. But you also have the reed whistles where it's like, oh, you can call for your horse, you can call an eagle. That was something that Aonuma talks about in interviews. He's like, oh yeah, Link's supposed to be in touch with animals. Like, not only is he a dog that can, you know, he can transform into a dog and he can talk to other animals that way, but he's also like a very nature-loving person, right? That was kind of a big aspect of Twilight Princess, at least for him, if you're analyzing it from the artist's perspective, right? Q&A testing in a video game is a lot like using animatics in a film, because then you can see the whole layout of the set and see how characters are going to move from one location to another, or, you know, action sequences, storyboarding. It's basically that, but in video game form, because it's an interactive play thing. Aonuma is even talking about that very directly. He's like, oh yeah, the strategy guide goes off the shelf as soon as the game does. So like, what's the point in making a game that is non-linear? He says that. And he's not saying that like disappointingly, he's saying it inquisitively. Because he's like, well, this is something that I could play with. This is something that, you know, can we stretch the limits of this? And you'll notice, like, Majora is, like, this extremely non-linear game. And then for Skyward Sword, he goes in the complete opposite direction. He makes, like, the most linear game that you could possibly think of. But even within Skyward Sword, you'll notice, maybe you won't notice because you won't give it a damn chance, but it's like, there's optional dialogue for the Kaikwai Elder. Kaikwai Elder is like, if you talk to if you save all the members of the forest, and then you talk to him, you get different dialogue than if you had just talked to him, and then you save them, right? And you come back and you backtrack. I think you have to backtrack a little bit more just to go like around him, right? So you don't wake him up. Which is kind of funny, but besides the point. And then he's going to give you the slingshot tutorial, right? And so if you're on your second playthrough and you know that he's going to do that, you can shoot the vine before you climb off of his back, and he'll have dialogue for that too. The game is linear, but it's also paying attention to when it's, you know, the way that it's being linear. And so it's, you know, and the fact that it's the same man that made Skyward Sword, that made Majora's Mask, you can tell that he's, you know, doing that on purpose. He's not just doing it willy-nilly. He's like, oh, this is, you know, this is important, let me do this. And, you know, playing with it for a second or two, but mostly, like, leaning into it hard. And then, when you get to Skyview Temple, right, you have that area with the water, right, and the water's gonna rise. You can do the left or right room in either order. There's a gem underneath the bridge on the left, and then on the right, it's above the door. The above the door one's more obvious, so most people go to the right first, but you can still go under the bridge on the left first. You can go in either order. So it's like, I don't know, man. The way that you're supposed to do this, by the way, I want to be very clear about this. way that you're supposed to do this is supposed to be sneaky up here. You know, like this. Sneak around the side like that. Like, that's the whole point of these, like, rooftops and shit. You're supposed to, like, the whole Windfall Island is, like, designed around this mission. It's very, like, Assassin's Creed-ish. In, like, the fact that it's, like, a tailing mission. And it's, like, stealth. You know? Like, this is straight out of, like, Infamous 1 or shit. You know what I mean? If you know what I mean, then you know what I mean. Video games are a very crazy thing. You know, the fact that it's like a movie that you can have like little button prompts with is awesome. And also, like, even tech demo-y games, I would say, you know, if you're just making a game with no story and it has like a bunch of little interactables, it's like, yeah, that can also be kind of fun. And I like games that blur the line between those things and try to play with it and, like, okay, well, how can we make, you know, how can we make this designed and how can we make this freeing? And how do you navigate in between those two things? Rather than doing what Breath of the Wild does, where it's just like, oh yeah, you can beat the boss with a wooden stick and, like, you know, just take the piss out of the entire story, right? As opposed to a much more moderate position that the original 3D Zelda games took, which was that, you know, you should have a little bit of column A and a little bit of column B. I think that's important. But yeah, my point being is that we had a whole story going on there, and now it's just, like, gone, man. And the things going on, and, you know, it's not just the timeline. It's not just like, oh yeah, literal haha. It's like no, there's purpose to it, because if you look, you know, I mean, well, first of all, let's make one thing clear. If there's two timelines, right? If there's an ending with the, you know, time travel, you also pay attention to the shape of the Triforce, right? This fucking thing, oh wait, I can't pull my shield out? So, you know, you have one at the top, and then you have two on the sides on the bottom. And that's just like how the timeline splits, right? Because you have Skyward, Ocarina up at the top, and then you have at the sides, you have Twilight Princess and Wind Waker. And, like, there's a lot of layers there. There's a lot of shit that, you know, I think, to me, is like Zelda 101, right? But then to a lot of people, they're just like, they tilt their head and they're like, what? I get kind of frustrated with that. One of the features of the video is that I'm reacting to Matthew Matosis, because he comes up with problems with these games that I would have never thought of in a million years. And I don't mean that in, like, a good way. I mean that in, like, a how are you this stupid way. And it's like, he complains about the Rito thing that, you know, I just explained earlier. It's like, yeah, they're not supposed to have a connection to the Zora because, you know, the world has moved on. That's the point. They don't care. You're not supposed to care. Ganon cares, and he's an obsessive, you know, monster. He wants to destroy Windfall and, you know, all this peaceful stuff. You know, people have come to, you know, and he's like, oh, your gods destroyed you, and all this, and it's like, well, I mean, they did that, but, like, it was ultimately like a situation where it was like, well, you know, it's only going to get worse before it gets better, right? There's no hero of time, and there's no substitute for that. So, like, what do you do? Because you can't, Look, you can't make a story where you have, like, this ultimate hero badass guy, and then you can just, like, spawn another one out of nowhere. That would make the other hero less interesting and less badass if there's, like, oh yeah, he can just show up unrelated to that. And I learned, like, a lot about Aonuma's, like, personal life, too, because he, like, changed his name, from, like, his wife's name. He changed it to his wife's name because, like, in Japan, basically, the way that works is, like, oh, you know, I have a brother, and the mother's family is not gonna, you know, they're not gonna have a way to carry on the name if she takes my name, so I'll just take her name, right? And if you read, like, Wind Waker interviews, he's like, oh yeah, Toon Link is basically a stand-in for my son. And he says that. And then he says, oh yeah, you know, Wind Waker was basically made for my son. And then if you read into that, you, like, stare at King of Red Lions and you're like, wait a minute. King Hyrule is Aonuma. If Toon Link is his son, like, he's the father figure. And you can interpret that ending cutscene so much more, like, differently, and it's so much more emotionally impactful when you have that context behind it, because you know, when you look at King Hyrule, it's like, that's his father. Like, metaphorically. Like, he lives with his grandma, he doesn't have a dad. But that's, like, the whole point of you know, all the Zelda games do that, you know. In Ocarina of Time, you know, you have the Deku Tree is, like, basically your father, and Navi is, like, your mom. And then Ganondorf has surrogate mothers in the place of Kume and Kotake, and, like, you know, it's always about orphans. It's always about, like, oh, he's just a ranch hand, or he's just a fairy boy, you know. You know, and he's always, like, he's just a knight at the academy. You know, he's this very ordinary person, right? Link is supposed to be a very strictly ordinary person, and he's not ready for the challenges that he's about to face. There's a connection between what Jabun says about Link and what Midna says about him. He says, oh, so this is the hero you were looking for, and Midna's like, nah, but he'll do, you know. He's not what I had in mind, but I guess this'll, you know, this'll work. And the whole time, you know, Deku Tree and Jabun are like, well, you know, King Hyrule promised that he'd find the Hero of Time. Did he do it? And he's like, no, I couldn't find him, but, like, this is our best shot. And the dialogue, I can't remember the specifics of that, but it's like, in certain places, it's like word for word, right? They're doing that on purpose because it's like, you know, he's not supposed to be a predestined, you know, hero, really. I mean, even in Twilight Princess, when, like, you know, he does have the blood of the hero, it's like, well, the hero wasn't remembered as a hero. So it kind of counteracts, because, like, oh yeah, you know? It's just kind of funny, like, he's never this predestined hero. And also, I want to say, like, another thing is, like, when you make your file, you know, usually in our RPG, there's a default name setting. It's like, oh, you can say I don't care on Earthbound, and it'll just give you Ness, Jeff, Paula, and Pooh, right? You can just hit I don't care on all of those, and it'll give you you know, Lucas, Flint, Kumatora, whatever, right? It'll give you all that out of the gate. Zelda has never done that. Zelda has always been, you name your file, and in the interviews, you know, when they're talking about the character, they use the name Link, right? But in Ocarina of Time, in Majora's Mask, in the Wind Waker, in Twilight Princess, and in Skyward Sword, you had to manually name him Link if you wanted him to be named Link. And you could also just name him whatever else the hell you wanted. So, for Breath of the Wild to come out and say not only is Link this predestined super soldier, right, that we've cryogenically frozen like he's like he's fucking Steve Rogers or something, and then also he's like definitively named Link. What are you talking about? Have you not been paying attention to the past 5 games that we've been doing this for like 20 years? It just completely defiles all of that. And people are like, oh yay, there's voice acting. What? Are you some kind of creep that goes around at night scaring people? I'm an ally of justice. I'm not a thief, I swear. I haven't stolen anything. Well, yeah, please let me go. It was just an impulse. Oh my god. This is literally like what they're trying to talk about with Ganondorf and the greed and the selfishness and the... Oh my god, it's like everything. You know, every side quest, you know, every small thing is like always talking about Ganondorf, metaphorically. Because what's going on here is like they're talking about the... You know, I haven't stolen anything yet. And if you read the interview where he's talking in 2006 about Twilight Princess, he's like, oh, well, you know, this happens 107 years after Ocarina of Time. Because, you know, the 7 is because of the adult timeline. You know, he's frozen for 7 years, but alternatively, he does Majora's Mask, and then, you know, the rest of the 7 years pass, and then 100 years pass again, so that it's parallel with Wind Waker still. But Majora is like parallel with the adult dungeons. Anyway, point is, he's like talking about that, and he's like, oh yeah, if you leave Ganondorf alive, you know, he's gonna do. I mean, Google Translate puts it as he's a sacker to do ridiculous things. That's obviously not how it's supposed to be read, but it's like, you know, he's gonna create mischief, basically. It's like, oh, I haven't stolen anything. Well, not yet, anyway. It's like, yeah, he's going to. Why don't you say anything? Or does that mean you're mad at me? Could you at least listen to the circumstances that led to my life? It's pretty much. Alright, sure. Yeah, and again, you know, Ganondorf is supposed to be this tragic villain. You know, he's gotten the same situation that Link does. You know, you'll notice the Lost Woods reuses the same mechanic in the Haunted Wasteland. And it's like meant to, you know, emphasize that connection where it's like, oh yeah, they're both orphans and they both struggled. But even though you come from that place, you can still end up in a bad place. You can take that pain and you can identify with it, and you can promote that feeling, and you can you know, or you can alternatively take your pain and you can, like, you know, make it, you know, have you build character with pain and struggling. You know, keep trying despite it. You know, and that's even, you know, what's going on with Majora's Mask and all of the transformations, because they transform into monsters and stuff when they put on the masks, and it's like, you know, Ganondorf also has the transformations because he transforms into a pig, and that's like a manifestation of like hate. But what do I know? Yeah, locked in the Forsaken Fortress, and I was held captive. Yeah, so Wind Waker's doing it again. You know, they have the rich kid and the rich family, and he spends every penny trying to get his daughter back, right? And then the poor man was greedy, and he took things opportunistically. And so even though he started out poor, he ends up rich and evil and greedy. And even though the rich man started out rich, he sells everything he owns, and he does it all to save his daughter because he cares about her more than he cares about money. And that's the moral there. And it's like, it matters more. My father spent every last rupee in his coffers in an attempt to get me rescued. Yeah. It's terrible, yeah. And to make matters worse, I still can't figure out the slob, the Maggie, the poorest girl in town, suddenly filthy rich. Maggie, of all people. It makes me sick. Do you understand my plight? Very well. Then will you let me go? Unfortunately, no. But why not? Because I'm honest. Like, you know, stories are about morals, you know? You're not supposed to escape into them. You're not supposed to, like, ooh, look at the cool monster, I'm gonna fight him, and get all the action, the cool explosions, and fighting, and all that's, you know, that's porn, guys. That's porn. This is what matters. This right here. Telling you the point of the story. I mean, maybe, you know, maybe I'm just autistic. Maybe I'm a little aspy, right? And I just take things too seriously. Maybe I'm focusing on it too much. But I think this matters. I think that spelling out the story, I think Azrael hugging you at the end of Undertale, I think that shit matters, right? that kind of like really preachy nonsense. I love that stuff. That's my like lifeblood. Whenever they do something and they like hammer the moral into you and they explicitly tell you what how you're supposed to interpret it and what it means, I love that. That's like my favorite part of games. And it was an Archie repeat. Whatever, you know. When you live in poverty, you can say the cheapest things without blinking, the cheesiest things without blinking an eye. Yeah, exactly. You know, it's cheesy, it's preachy, but at the end of the day, it's like, that's awesome, and good luck to you. Thanks for tonight. It makes me tear up, man. It does. We should demand more of this, man. I miss when Zelda did this. I missed when Zelda was about this, directly. I missed when Eiji Aonuma had creative control. I miss when he was making a video game about his personal life and about his son. I miss when video games were art created by artists and not tech demos created by programmers. That's what I really care about. An idiosyncratic, you know, weird artist that, you know, he's outsider artist. You know, he doesn't know anything about video games. I mean, he didn't make video games before this. He just made Marvelous. And Miyamoto hired him because he's like, oh, well, you know, you got these wooden dolls and you've got Marvelous and whatever. But it's like, at the end of the day, you know, that's what matters. It's human expression. It's not about it's not about the industry. It's not about the technology. It's about people, humans and their stories. And that's what I care about, and that's what I'll continue to care about. Majora's Mask, obviously, also really unfinished game. Anuma only gave him a year to make it, and you know I told that story already. They told it like 80 times, so whatever. I don't have bombs, so I can't go in here. I can't go in there because I don't have bombs. I can't go in there because I don't have bombs. I guess I could just go to Outset Island and check the rupee chest. But that's gonna be a long-ass sale. Whatever. I'm talking anyway. So what I want to say is that this is a very gradual thing. So in Ocarina of Time, there's very brief dialogue right before the Morpha fight, and it says, "Oh, look out! That's not normal water." And then Morpha, it's like, "Oh, it's an amoeba. You can't swim in that water. It's like alive." And you think like, "Oh, who's saying this dialogue?" And Norky has this video where he's like, trying to get through the Japanese dialogue and stuff, and he's like, he actually figured it out. It's Gerudo saying that. For years there were theories of like, oh, the sages actually die, and like, that might even be true. They might give up their physical forms, but I don't think they die before you get to the boss or anything. Like, I mean, maybe they do, but it's like, it's kind of a weird situation, right? Because they look like ghosts at the end, and obviously all the other sages are dead, like in the other games. So you get this impression, right? Like, oh yeah, the sages give up their life, right? So, because they're very forlorn in the cutscenes where they give you the medallions. It's like, oh, well, who would have thought I would awaken as a sage? Well, I guess I'm going to be stuck here for a while. It's like, oh, is this the afterlife? You kind of get that impression, right? So, moving along, we got Majora, and Majora is an unfinished game. I think fair to say, right? And one of the biggest things on the cutting room floor is cut Zelda animations. Zelda was supposed to have a more prominent role in Majora's Mask. I talked a little bit about that before, where the Hyrulean army is like outfitting him. They gave him the hero's shield and they gave him a new hilt for the Kokiri sword, okay? So bear all that in mind, right? Then we move on to Wind Waker, and in Wind Waker, Zelda, is Tetra, and she has all that thing. And then in the boss fight for both Wind Waker and Twilight Princess, there's a situation where instead of receiving the light arrows, or actually you do get the light arrows in this game, but Zelda like steals your bow, and then in Twilight Princess you don't even get that. It's like, oh well, Zelda has the light arrows and she shoots them at Ganondorf while you're on the horse. So Zelda is like helping you in the boss fights. She's shooting the light arrows, and that's like her dungeon item basically. Like, see, she's supposed to be the secret sage or whatever. When you put all those clues together, I think you have a pretty clear and active idea of like what's supposed to be there. And then if you look at Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, the sages have more active roles. Like, one of the big parts of the cutscenes and the voice acting, which Aonuma was very heavily involved in, by the way, he wanted, one of the things that he always emphasized throughout every interview is, like, if we did voice acting, I would want to use voice in a way that hadn't been used before. I would want to use the voice acting to have, like, some sort of gameplay mechanic with it, and to have it, like, be a part of the story, be a part of the action. And when he says that, and then he is deliberately making Breath of the Wild, this voice acted game, and then he has like the sages are like the main characters again, like they were in Ocarina. It paints that picture of like, oh, you're in the same scenario as you were before, and so you think like, oh, the sages in Ocarina were supposed to do this. And there's all sorts of clues, like Darunia in Hyrule Warriors, he wields the Megaton hammer. I think that's a pretty easy clue. Like, it's not a fan theory. It's like, hey, this is pretty damn obvious, because if Gerudo has cut dialogue and all this other shit, it's like, well, damn, I mean, the sages were just supposed to help you kill the bosses. Like, Darunia would have taken the Megaton hammer from you and stunned Volgavia for you, and Gerudo would have had the ice arrows, and she would have freezed Morpha for you to stun Morpha. And except the ice arrows ended up being moved again. I have a Forbidden Wood small key. Okay. I don't know what the hell I'm gonna do with that. Well, anyway, what else? What else can I even think of to say? Tears of the Kingdom also does that. They have, like, because there's more, like, the bosses actually, like, appear outside the dungeons, right? And so there's, like, kind of this element where it's, like, they're kind of emphasizing this thing that was, again, supposed to be an ocarina. You have Morpha, like, freezes over Zora's domain. You know, the bosses are supposed to have this active environmental threat to the specific race and to the specific location that they're in, and that was important for story purposes. But that didn't really get realized in Ocarina, and so there's like a lot of layers to, like, okay, well, we could fix all these problems with Ocarina now. We can't because there's, like, company mandates, but, you know, we could, in theory. Oh, yeah, I wanted to talk about this. Okay, so Wind Waker, you know, for, like, the speed dial and the compass and the treasure charts, like this stuff, holy shit, this stuff, this is, like, so in-depth and detailed. Aonuma wanted you to feel like you were actually performing cartography, like in real life. And that was, like, the whole, like, you pay attention to the moon cycles, right? And you're like charting the seas, right? That's what this feels like. And that was also, like, you know, he leans into that for Phantom Hourglass too, because you're actually able to draw on the map and you're with the DS stylus, and that was the whole point. And then in Twilight Princess, it's not as, you know, pronounced because there was development problems with Twilight Princess, but you know, you have the and it was going to be more pronounced. This is another thing with, like, Breath of the Wild cut content. Okay, so with Twilight Princess, part of the point of that game is, you know, you have the reed whistles and you have bugs, right? And you're riding around on your horse, kind of like Ocarina. You know, there's grottos and stuff, but really, it was supposed to feel like you were foraging, right? You're messing around in the grass and you're finding bugs, and you're, you know, it's kind of like Pokemon a little bit. But you also have the reed whistles where it's like, oh, you can call for your horse, you can call an eagle. That was something that Aonuma talks about in interviews. He's like, oh yeah, Link's supposed to be in touch with animals. Like, not only is he a dog that can you know, he can transform into a dog, and he can talk to other animals that way, but he's also, like, a very nature-loving person, right? That was kind of a big aspect of Twilight Princess, at least for him, if you're analyzing it from the artist's perspective, right? And then, if you look at Breath of the Wild, it's really a child timeline game. I mean, it's really a sequel to Twilight Princess. It's really just, oh hey, you know, here's Hyrule again. There's no Hyrule after Wind Waker. It's completely flooded and destroyed. It's at the bottom of the ocean, and not only is there no more barrier protecting it, but it's like, it's completely, you know, it's dead. So the only place that Breath of the Wild can be is in the child timeline. There is no scenario where the Great Sea acquiesces and it's like, oh, Hyrule's back again. No, it's bullshit. That would never happen. Because it would undo the ending to Wind Waker. It wouldn't make any fucking sense. And of course, it certainly doesn't merge the timelines together. It's a child timeline game, guys. There's so many clues to that I want to, like, first of all, the only way that you could revive Ganondorf in Tears of the Kingdom, the only way you could do that is if you said that, oh, Ganondorf is turned to stone in the ending of Wind Waker, and he's sunk at the bottom of the ocean. There's no way that you're going to be able to exhume that corpse, okay? It's down there. It's down there. You're not going to be able to take that corpse and be like, okay, we're going to resurrect Ganondorf. No one's going to be able to do that. But with the child timeline, there's a little bit of ambiguity because he's stabbed through the chest, not through the heart, through the heart, and then he doesn't turn into stone. He just kind of stands there. So it is slightly ambiguous as far as that goes. He doesn't turn into stone. And he's also not sunk at the bottom of the ocean. So that would be like, you could actually recover that corpse, I think. It's more reasonable. But anyway, same thing with, like, there being Red Zora. There's no Red Zora in the adult timeline. And we also know there's no fucking Downfall timeline. I already talked about that. The Downfall timeline's bullshit. Anuma's not involved with those games, guys. He wasn't even on Nintendo's payroll at that point. He couldn't have been influencing those games. I have a slim theory that he influenced certain parts of A Link to the Past, but that's only a tangential thing, because he made a game in secret with Iwata, and they never released whatever that game was supposed to be called. They never released it. And that happened before A Link to the Past. And I have some theories that he met Koizumi that way, and they were able to work on the war together. I have theories, okay, but I don't have a lot of concrete evidence for that, okay? At the end of the day, he did not have any influence on the Downfall timeline games, okay? He's just an executive producer at that point, or he's not on the team at all, so it doesn't matter. What matters is the games that he was involved with, and he made the timeline, so that was the whole point, right? Anyway, rants aside, for the child timeline and Breath of the Wild to be there with the Red Zora and, Ganondorf actually, you could revive that corpse reasonably. There's a lot of layers to that. You could say that Breath of the Wild is continuing what Twilight Princess couldn't, with all of the foraging and being in touch with the animals and blowing into reed whistles and all that stuff. It was kind of like that, in the same way that Wind Waker is about cartography. And you could have had a game where weapons do break, and you could repair them like you do in Skyward Sword, and you could be in touch with the elements. You could craft your own weapons. You could all these things, and like, I feel like it was very padded out. I feel like Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom were definitely supposed to be one game. It wasn't supposed to be DLC. It wasn't supposed to be a sequel. It was supposed to be one game, and it was supposed to be like, okay, well, here's the Sky Islands, and because it's not a complete story. Like you shoot pig cannon, right? You shoot pig cannon in a field, right? And then you just stand there and look at Zelda. That's not a complete story, guys. And then it's like, Tears of the Kingdom, it's like, you finally fight Ganondorf, they go underneath Hyrule and whatever. It's like, why is that a continuation of the story? That should have been one game. I missed when Eiji Aonuma had creative control. I miss when he was making a video game about his personal life and about his son. I miss when video games were art created by artists and not tech demos created by programmers. That's what I really care about. An idiosyncratic, weird artist that, he's outsider artist. He doesn't know anything about video games. I mean, he didn't make video games before this. He just made Marvelous. And Miyamoto hired him because he's like, oh, well, you got these wooden dolls, and you've got Marvelous and whatever. But it's like, at the end of the day, that's what matters. It's human expression. It's not about the industry. It's not about the technology. It's about people, humans and their stories. And that's what I care about, and that's what I'll continue to care about.